Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's event, Communication and Compliance, Engaging with Social Media in Framingham, Massachusetts. Now, this is Morgan Wright. I'm a Senior Fellow for Government Technology. I also do a few other things with the media and with the government, but enough of that. This is more about, and look, I'm excited for today's event and to be the moderator, and just want to say thank you, folks, for joining us. We're going to have fun over the next 60 minutes. So before we begin, just a couple of brief housekeeping notes. There always is some of these issues, so we'll just get them out of the way up front. First of all, you folks, we always get requests saying, hey, will a recording of this be made? You know, can we get it? Yes, we will make a recording of this. We will email it to everybody within 48 hours. Use it for your reference, pass it along to your colleagues. You know, it's going to be available for replay, so it's designed to be interactive. So you folks are also going to see a Q&A button down at the bottom. Make sure that you folks send us questions. We were just talking earlier with Nicole and Anil, which I'll introduce here in a little bit. We're talking about all the things that are happening. So folks, questions, you want to hear the knowledge and insight that both of these folks have. Well, you can also download a PDF of the slides. You can do so by clicking on Webinar Resources widget at the bottom. Also, during today's event, look, if anything happens, you can hashtag it GovTechLive. Let us, tell your friends what's going on. And at the close of the webinar, what's even more important, at the close of the webinar, there's a brief survey. Let us know how we're doing. Let us know if the topic, what are you thinking of the topics? Help us improve what we're doing. Your feedback has actually changed some of the presentations that we've done. So if you're able to, and if you have to leave early, just make sure you at least fill out as much as you can before you go. At this time, disable your pop-up blockers. If you're experiencing any media or player issues or have any problems, our crack staff from On24, and Kenny here at On24 will be glad to help you with that. Just go to the chat window, and we'll be glad to help you with that. So now, as they say, let's get ready to rumble. The main event, folks, here. I have the pleasure, and joining me today is Nicole Figueredo. She's the Public Information Officer from the town of Framingham, Massachusetts, and definitely a Tom Brady fan, as we figured it out early. Anil Chawla is the founder and CEO of ArchiveSocial, and we're going to talk to him at the end of this, and then we'll go into Q&A. But before we do, I get the floor for a little bit. So let's talk about quickly the agenda. I'm going to give you just a quick social media by the numbers. Nicole's going to come on and talk about communication and compliance, the title of the presentation, and then Neil will follow up very interesting legal aspects of social media use. So let's just do a quick social media by the numbers, because, folks, there's only 3 numbers that count, and you'll notice there's a pattern. In the first one, there's only one thing, second one, 2, third one, 3. So what are those things? First one, like I said, there's your 3 things we're going to talk about. The first one is actually the most important one that we're really here to talk about today, folks, and that is the First Amendment. Without fail, on all of these discussions about social media, it has opened up a brave new frontier about how do we handle speech and protected speech in this age of instant communication, Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, you just name it, all the different types of social media. So how do we handle those things? So there are some very tricky and very serious issues about how do you handle the freedom of expression. Can you delete comments? Can you moderate things? We're going to find some of those things out here today. Let's talk about the second one. There's actually 2 things under this one. Now, part of my work at the Center for Digital Government and for Government Technology is we do these surveys every 2 years, biannual surveys of the states. We talk to them, and we talk to people saying, what are you finding are the most important issues to you? And again, without fail, all the time, there's 2 key issues constituents and states are dealing with all the time. The first one is transparency. People want a transparent government. They want to know that there's nothing being done under the covers, things being done out of daylight, which they can't see and can't respond to and can't react to. So I'm telling you, folks, in all of the surveys we've done, all the 50 states, the thousands of people we've talked to, without fail, transparency, if it's not number 1, it's usually tied for first. Now, the second one is accountability. They want transparency so they can, in order to have accountability, we want to hold the stewards of our public funds accountable. We want to make sure that people are taking actions consistent with the values of our community. The only way you can do that is with the transparency, is to be able to hold people accountable. So people are very interested in accountability. Now, the third issue, and there's 3 things here, this is kind of a big thing of mine. One of the things I've noticed with the advent of new technology, everybody says, oh, we got to do something different. Folks, I'm telling you, there is nothing new about this technology. The technology, all it does is enable a new way to do things we've done for years in terms of communication and share information and share ideas. But the first thing you have to do, you got to have a policy in place. If you do not have a policy in place, if you don't know what it is you want to do, in other words, if you want to take a trip but you don't know where you're going, then any road will get you there. So policy makes sure that you have a destination in mind, that you know the outcome that you want. Takes a little time, But trust me, if you get the policy down first, then the next part will become easy. And yes, this is training dog. Why does training dog work out? Because you have to exercise. Training and behavior, the good behaviors come from training. You know, you can't change people's habits, but you can change how they respond to the cues that they get. So if they're used to getting an email and clicking on the link, well, they're still going to get the email. Let's train them on what to do. Stop, think, you know, don't click that link. Look at these things for a minute. Folks, I'm telling you, training is like bathing. Neither one is permanent, and you can always tell when it hasn't been done regularly enough. So make sure that you do training on these behaviors that you want. And then the third thing is once you do that, then you get access to the cool technology. This is a stealth fighter. This is affectionately called a Frisbee. I'm telling you folks right now, does anybody believe that you can get into one of these stealth fighters without first sitting through a ton of classroom work, the policy, the paperwork, then going through the training, going through simulators, doing all the things they need to do before they get into this? It happens this way with high tech. It needs to happen the same way with the technology that you do. So, and last thing, a fun fact of the day for Facebook, if you're doing it this way, I had to tell you, you are doing it wrong. So let me tell you now we get to the fun part. Now let me tell you, I'm going to just tell you, here's Nicole. Here's her picture. But what we're going to do first is I'm going to introduce her after I ask you the first question. So what we have is we have a poll question. So folks, pay attention. We're going to ask you a question. We'll read out the results, and then I'm going to turn it over to Nicole after I introduce her. So let's get to the first question. What is your opinion on social media as a public record? Do you believe it is definitely a public record by law? Do you believe it might be a record, but your activity is not worth retaining? Do you feel strongly it is not a public record, or you don't know? So it's definitely a public record by law, might be a record, but your activity isn't worth retaining. You feel strongly it's not a public record, or you don't know. Now, while you folks are voting, as they say, let me introduce now Nicole Figueredo. Now, Nicole has more than a decade of experience working in state and municipal government and 20 years of experience in the construction industry. Now, Nicole works very closely with government officials and all the industry leaders on numerous large-scale infrastructure improvement projects and various government initiatives. Now, working closely with the community, Nicole, she really excels at establishing rapport, building trust through communication. And we are talking about social media. You can see why. She acts as a liaison between government agencies, contractors, consultants, and the community. Now, one of the things she does is she develops strategic outreach plans, including organizing and staffing public and interagency meetings, drafting press releases, preparing fact sheets. I mean, folks, just a ton of things. And she works on implementing media and outreach plans and distributing all of the things, the advisory, the email blasts, updates to residents, all of the things. I mean, when you hear her describe her position, you're going to see she truly wears many hats. So let's go to our results now. Wow, pretty clear. 84% of you think it is a public record by law. 3% say it might be a record, but it's not worth retaining. 10% think it's not a public record. And 3% of you don't know. So actually, Nicole, that's actually a pretty good start. A lot of people think it's a public record by law. And I'm going to turn the floor over to you at this time.
Thank you very much. As you know, I'm Nicole Figueredo. I'm the Public Information Officer and Webmaster for the town of Framingham. One of the first questions that I usually get when I tell people what my title is what is it exactly that you do? Because I don't understand. A little background, a little over 2 years ago when the town posted the position, I was instantly attracted to it because it was a different type of position. It allowed me to use two positions, the public information portion, and I'm also a webmaster, combine them together to have a more cohesive, larger strategic outreach, hitting as many residents as we could with our information. Public information officers are also known as communications coordinators. We collect, verify, and disseminate information to the public through effective communications with the media, including press releases, media advisories, emergency notifications, alerts, website, and social medias. We also provide information to our boards and keep our officials updated of critical issues as they're moving forward and things that pop up. We utilize the webmaster portion of my position to coordinate some of this information through our website, ensuring, part of it is ensuring that our servers are operational, our hardware and software is operating correctly. The design of the website allows for people to find information with ease and that we're managing our content appropriately. So for more background for anyone who doesn't know about Framingham, Mass, or has never been here, we are the largest town in the Commonwealth. We have approximately 69,000 residents, maybe a little less, a little more. Of our residents, we have over 20 spoken languages. We have a town form of government with a board of selectmen, a town manager, and a robust town meeting. We also are home to Mass Bay Community College, Framingham State University. We are one of Metro West's largest employers. We have Bose, Genzyme, Staples, TJX, they call us home. We also have the Metro West Medical Center here. Framingham's about 25 square miles large in area. We have 240 miles of roadway. We have major routes including the Massachusetts Turnpike, Route 9, Route 126, Route 135, all running through Framingham. So it can be it's a commuter hub, so to speak. We also have one of the 10th largest MBTA commuter rail stations, or the 10th most active commuter rail station out of the 133 that the MBTA operate, with approximately 1,300 weekly boardings. And we're also host to a lot of the large regional events, including we're a host community for the Boston Marathon, Metro Fest. The World Cup is big here, as well as Latin Fest. So we're dealing with a lot of people coming in and out of our community, and a lot of residents that speak a lot of different languages, so it's a very diverse community. And when people ask us how we engage our community, my typical reply is by any means necessary. We'll utilize social media, traditional media, whatever we need to do to reach a larger, broader audience. We try to simultaneously share the information. So if it's on our website, it's on our social media pages. We also try to educate and inform our community about different programs and highlights and other things that we do. We use social media also to open up two-way communication and dialogue. It's really important that you have that dialogue with your community, because if you don't know there's a problem, that's an even larger problem for you. It's all about two-way communication. Eric Quailman uses the term, or coined the phrase, the power of social media is that it forces necessary change. The town of Framingham has 9 Facebook pages, 7 Twitter accounts, 2 LinkedIn accounts, an Instagram account, a Google+, a YouTube, and we use all of these accounts using a tool called Hootsuite to manage the communications. It also allows us to spread and hit a larger, broader audience by sharing information back and forth to create a buzz about Framingham, a buzz about what's going on, and a buzz about issues or programs that we're having here in town. It's also extremely important when it's a critical communication, when you have a winter storm alert, when you have a water main break, a sewer main break. All of these things are critical in critical communications, and you want to hit the largest, broadest audience that you can, especially for your commuters coming into your towns and your cities and getting that information out there. We share information about everything. Right now, a hot topic here, and I bet it's a hot topic everywhere, is the heat wave that's going on. So we're sharing a lot of safety tips about, heat exhaustion, heat stroke, heat-related illnesses, and resources that are available to the community for cooling off. We've also used our social media sites for assisting in the search for missing children or elderly persons that have walked away from their homes or their places of residence. One of the things that our police department has used social media for successfully, in combination with the town and sharing the information back and forth, was with a person wanted by the Framingham Police Department. The individual on the slide shown here was wanted by the police department for an alleged home invasion. We posted the information and shared it through our various sites to cause that larger, broader information going out to a larger group of people. And within 24 hours, a member of the community saw the post on social media, contacted the police department, and the individual was captured. And thank goodness that happened. I apologize. Social media is a great tool to educate your information and share information, but you also have to be receptive to the information that's coming into you as well. Sometimes we don't necessarily get all the positive attaboys, but 9 times out of 10 you do. Let's see. What's important about all the information coming in and going out is our ability as well to capture that information. Because of public information laws here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the Secretary of the Commonwealth addresses social media records using the same guidelines that they would use for any electronic records, and the requirements are the same. The Secretary cautions public entities that the content existing on servers outside about the content of servers on the outside beyond our control. This means that we can't rely on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, or any of those other agencies to provide us with this information in a timely manner. This has become even more important right now that Governor Baker has signed into Mass General Law an act to improving public records. There are a couple of things that everyone here should take note of, especially if you're dealing with social media, is that the law substantially revises the time that we have the ability to respond to these public records requests, and now there's potentially punitive damages associated with the request if we don't comply. The benefits to using programs such as ArchiveSocial and similar to ArchiveSocial is having the information available at your fingertips. It's automatically archiving the records behind the scenes. You don't have to worry about it. It's a one-stop shop. So within a few quick keystrokes, you could have every record from someone who sent it or posted it. Even though they may have deleted it, they may have taken it off, the tools with ArchiveSocial, it grabs it. It saves that metadata in case you do need that information to go forward to litigation or you need it for an investigation. We had one situation where we had an employee that was harassed and targeted by a certain individual in the community, and with just a few keystrokes, we were able to get that information, put it all together in a nice little package, and hand it over for further review for our Board of Selectmen, our town manager, and other people to, make decisions. So I definitely believe that if you're using social media, you definitely need to have some type of archiving in place, especially with the Massachusetts general laws regarding public information and requests. And that is, I think, it. Back to you, Morgan.
Well, hey, Nicole, thank you. By the way, you got another rabid Tom Brady fan out there. Kevin Berry in City of Westfield wrote in, the first person to give a comment says, free Tom Brady. Didn't know Tom Brady was in custody, but hey, Kevin, we are going to take that under advisement, and Nicole will tweet out an updated status, on that later. Hey, no, that's great stuff, Nicole. And folks, remember, we've got that Q&A button down there. Make sure that you guys send us your questions. Like I said, between Anil and Nicole, you've got a lot of insight on this call today. We want to make sure that you guys are taking advantage of it. So now let's go to the next part of our presentation. This is Anil Chawla. It's always great when we get the founder and CEO of the company to come on. So we're going to do the same thing. There's Anil's bright, shining face. I'm going to read you now the question. We have a different version of a question. Get your response to that, and then we're going to turn the floor over to Anil. So let's do that. Now we've talked about whether or not you thought it was a public record or not, if you thought what you were doing was important. Now let's instead talk about how you're currently retaining records of social media. You're not retaining any of your own records and rely on the networks. That means you rely on Twitter, on Facebook, whatever it is you're using. You take manual captures, screenshots, copy and paste. That's a time-intensive one, but you might do that. You use a personal backup tool like Backupify, Social Safe, something along those lines. You have an automated solution for archiving, or you are already a happy ArchiveSocial customer, so you don't retain them and you rely on the networks. You take manual captures. You use a personal backup tool. You have an automated solution, or you're already a happy ArchiveSocial customer. While you're voting on that, let me read to you just a little bit about Anil. Now, Anil is the founder and CEO of ArchiveSocial. They are the public sector's leading provider of technology to help government agencies archive and manage risk. Yes, folks, risk related to social media. Remember we talked about the First Amendment, one of your biggest areas you'll need to deal with. ArchiveSocial partnered with the state of North Carolina in 2010 to launch the world's first open, interactive archive of social media. Since then, ArchiveSocial has enabled hundreds of other government agencies and entities ranging from the towns of Middleborough and the city of Chicopee, there in Mass, to the U.S. Department of Justice. By the way, folks, that is the world's largest law firm, maintain records of social media for legal protection and public records requirements. Now, the company was selected for the prestigious Code for America Accelerator in 2013. 2014, recognized as a cool vendor in government by Gartner, they're a leading analyst firm, and honored as a GovTech 100 company earlier this year by Government Technology Magazine. Anil is also a co-host of the GovTech Social podcast. I actually had the chance to be his guest here a couple weeks ago. It broke all the ratings of all time for having me on. No, not really. I don't know if it even got downloaded once, but hopefully it did. But anyway, so let's go to the results now. So 58% of you, you're not relying or retaining your records and relying on the networks. 22% of you are doing it the old-fashioned way, taking manual captures. 3% of you use a personal backup tool, like we talked about. 12% of you, 13% have an automated solution for archiving. And then 3% of you are already a happy ArchiveSocial customer. So, Anil, I mean, that's when you look at just that 58%, they're just relying on the networks. I know you've got some insight on that along with the manual capture. So, hey, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to turn it over to you at this point. The floor is yours.
Well, Morgan, I greatly appreciate it. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you to all of you who've taken time out of your busy Tuesday to join us. This is a hot topic in terms of the use of social media in government and really balancing the risks and challenges you have. I also want to thank Nicole for sharing your story. I suspect there's a lot of folks in our audience that are wearing the PIO hat, wearing the webmaster hat, maybe wearing some other hats, and somehow trying to fit social media in the mix. But regardless, recognizing how important social media is and having that positive conversation, getting the results that you talked about in terms of capturing those criminal suspects. So thank you again for sharing your story and also teeing up this topic of archiving and record keeping, especially in context of the legislative changes in Massachusetts around public access that Governor Baker has signed, and the fact that there could be punitive damages. And really what I'm here to talk about is making sure that the legal challenges, this risk, all this stuff doesn't bring you down and get in the way of that open dialogue between your town or city or department and your citizens. Social media provides this transparent, bidirectional communication channel that we haven't had in the past, and it's really showing a lot of benefits for agencies, including there in Framingham. So what I'm going to start with is giving you some real-life examples and case studies of the legal challenges, the risks. I know some of this will be a little scary for a lot of folks who haven't heard about this kind of case law before. But again, I want to lay out that disclaimer up front that I'm going to share the scary stuff with you because I want to help provide some direction on how you can get ahead of it, be proactive, protect yourself from the risk so that the risk doesn't get in the way, so that you can weather the storm and continue to interface with your citizens and provide value to them and have them provide value back to you. Now, Morgan, on the notion of the polls, while 58% are still relying on the networks, that number is being chipped away. So I'm really happy to see folks taking action, whether that's taking screenshots or using automated archiving, as about 15% of you are. That's really compelling. We're definitely seeing agencies move more and more to some kind of record-keeping approach, and it's paying dividends. So I'm going to share with you some tips on how to archive and maintain records of social media. In full disclosure, that is entirely what my company does, but we're not the only company that does this. So what I want to do today is share with you some fundamentals, some concepts, and some tips and tricks on how to approach archiving to help your agency make the best decision for you. And in that regard, I'm here to answer any questions that I can answer and be a resource to all of you who've tuned in. So with that, I'm going to jump right in. One of the key questions that we started with was a poll around social media being a public record. Really great to see the vast majority, about 85% of you, felt that social media is a public record. Again, that has changed dramatically in the past 2 years. It used to be 60% or so of our audience in states like Massachusetts we're recognizing social media as a record. But it has become abundantly clear, not only by the definition of the laws, but by the clarifications that have come out from records bodies and from what's happening in the real world. The social media is just like email. It's just like any other government communication. It's really about what's happening on that communications channel. It doesn't matter if you get a crime tip on a piece of paper, a crime tip in an email or a crime tip in a Twitter direct message. A crime tip is a crime tip, and it's just as valuable regardless of medium. And so what I want to talk to you about first is really recognizing your social media as record, both public record as well as an important legal record. And I'll do that by covering a few high-level examples that many of you may have seen in the news, and also examples that we've seen around the country. And one that I'll start with is still fairly raw, devastating, just a horrific tragedy that the nation experienced just over a month ago in the city of Orlando, the worst mass shooting in the United States of America. But in the context of our conversation, the reason I want to mention this is it highlights how important social media is and will be in an emergency situation for you. Orlando, recognizing in the middle of the night that this was going to be a chaotic incident, immediately put out on their Twitter feed, all of our updates are going to come from our Twitter account, no email or phone calls, please. So immediately getting that broadcast channel and letting the world know this is where we're going to disseminate information. We're going to do it as quickly as we can, and everyone can see it transparently. That's the power of social media. And really what we've seen time and time again, whether it's Orlando, the situation in Dallas, San Bernardino, or any of the natural disasters, the flooding that we had in Texas and Oklahoma last year, social media is the most effective channel for emergency management and crisis communications. And that doesn't have to be this headline-grabbing incident. Hopefully you're not going to deal with that in your community, but every community has its challenges, crimes, some sort of natural disaster or incident like a drought or a flood, a thunderstorm. And social media is so incredibly powerful that we want to make sure that we can use this channel and not have a legal roadblock to disseminating information. But a key there is having the records, because this is so fresh, it's so raw, it's coming out on your Twitter feed. This information is only being generated in this one place. It's not being kept anywhere else. And so in a crisis, whether it's like Orlando's or it's much smaller, hopefully something that you experience is never like what Orlando experienced, but you're going to create information that needs to be maintained. And so that's the first example where we see records being created. So I encourage you all to think about your social media and any incidents you've had, whether it's crime or weather-related, and think about how your social media may have generated records and what you're doing to maintain records of that information. The next example talks about something that doesn't happen in the physical world but happens online. So while social media has a lot of benefits, sometimes something online can really overwhelm your agency. In this case, city of South Daytona is about a population of 12,000 in Florida. But they had an incident where a photo went viral of a dog's mouth being duct taped. A citizen posted it. It had nothing to do with the city, but the citizen posted it, happened to tag City of South Daytona in the post, even though she was not in that city. And there was an immediate outcry as this photo went around the Internet, where folks were showing up on the City of South Daytona PD and city page demanding that the city and police department do something about this and they arrest this person. So they had 24,000 comments in a matter of days when they normally may have just a few posts a day. And it overwhelmed them, and they actually received information requests from the national media, because the media now turns to social media. And because they were archiving, they were able to fulfill those requests and know they had the records that they needed and not get bogged down with that side of their responsibilities. Instead, they could focus on communicating with the citizens. The next example is just close to home for me. We're out of Durham, North Carolina, and 911, I've seen this happen many times across the country. 911 became unavailable for Verizon customers. And at that point, how does a citizen reach 911 if there's an emergency? And so what we've seen time and time again is public agencies use social media to get information out when there's no other way to do it that effectively. And so using Twitter and Facebook, letting folks know how they can reach 911 in case there is an emergency. Again, this creates records that aren't maintained elsewhere that certainly constitute public records. And then finally, as we complete the circle here, every public agency on social media in some way is there to serve the citizens and provide some sort of customer service. And that customer service generates communications that do constitute record. Again, not everything on social media is a public record worth maintaining, but your social media absolutely does generate records if you're at all engaged with it. And so we have an example from the city of Austin where somebody reported a sidewalk not being taken care of in terms of it being mowed, and the code department responded back asking for more details. So again, these conversations happen on social media. They're not recorded elsewhere, and they may contain information that fits under your public retention records retention requirements and your retention schedules. So those are some really high-level examples. One thing you might be wondering then is, well, if this is all happening and it's on there on Facebook and Twitter, okay, maybe it is public record, but why do I have to do anything about it? Well, the number one reason is someone may ask you for it. and they have every right to do so, as we talked about with the legislative changes there in Massachusetts in terms of public information. One really clear example is out of the city of Seattle. This was actually about 2 years old now, where a citizen was following the Twitter feeds from the police department that were set up to basically communicate all of the police and crime incidents on Twitter, kind of like a police scanner on Twitter. And the citizen actually felt that some of the police incidents were not being shared, or they were being shared in a very delayed fashion, and he was trying to determine if he could trust this Twitter feed as a source of information. So he actually sent a few tweets to Seattle PD and a few tweets and said, "I want the archives of all the tweets for your police beats. Please consider this a Public Records Act request." So in effect, he made a public records request for social media using social media. And that, folks, is really a sign of the times. Now, Seattle came back and said, look, you can't issue a public records request on Twitter. You have to fill out our web form. But you can absolutely make a request for this Twitter content and give us 3 weeks to respond. Now, this type of request for Twitter data, Facebook data, which, again, the citizen's no longer seeing it on Twitter. That's why he's asking the agency to produce it. This kind of request for very specific social networking data is fairly rare. You may not have seen this yet in your agency. We have, of course, seen it many, many times, given that we work with hundreds of agencies across the country, but it's still very rare. But we do see with every one of the agencies we work with is this other box of the types of public records requests you've always received and you always will receive, which is any and all documents that relate to, all notifications of, all emails and communications between X and Y. So again, these are records requests that could be scoped to a very specific incident or topic, but they're really agnostic of the form. All emails and communications. Well, if you were communicating during a disaster or maybe it was just a customer service incident, your social media could have been a part of that. Certainly street closures and things like that, we're seeing more and more social media as a part of that. So you really have to think, when you're responding to these requests, are you fulfilling those requests? Are you including your social media, and should you be? And more often than not, we find that the answer is, I'm not yet including my social media, but I should be. And we're also seeing more and more requesters, whether it's the news agencies or advocacy groups, asking for social networking content. And that's really where I want to share with you some case studies that we've experienced that have not been national news, but really demonstrate the importance of being proactive and demonstrate the fact that social media now touches everything you do as an agency. And because legal incidents come up in government, there will always be litigation because of how important the services you provide are. The social media is going to touch those situations as well, and will be a part of it. And the importance of being proactive can really help you weather the storm and move on and continue to conduct business as usual. And so I'll start with is a case study in the Northeast, Vineland, New Jersey. The police department had been instructed by the attorney to disallow comments on Facebook because of concerns of negativity. Now, I would not recommend that approach. That's really going to dilute the value of social networking for you. And there's also no way to actually switch off comments on Facebook, but with a lot of effort, you can set up filters and keyword moderation to force Facebook to prompt you and allow you to hide comments as they show up. And so they did this, and they were hiding every comment that showed up on Facebook, and a citizen noticed and said, well, you must have something to hide if you're going to hide everyone's comments. And said, I'm going to issue a public records request once a month, every month, until you change your policy. And the citizen actually did this. And for a police officer whose part-time responsibility is to manage social media, trying to gain the benefits, give the benefits of social media to the citizens with disseminating information, this was a real burden. And so he was having to scroll through Facebook, take screenshot after screenshot after screenshot, and respond. And ultimately, with an automated archive, he was able to do that in just a few clicks. And so what was happening in this situation, a citizen is trying to create a burden that brings you down, and you really want to be able to fulfill your responsibility in a way that doesn't bring you down, that doesn't slow you down. And now the department is equipped to do that so that they are not distracted by someone who's just trying to really be an annoyance in this case. Now, public records requests certainly can be valid in many cases. And that takes me to the next case study, where in Texas last year, Central Texas experienced the highest level of flooding ever in the state of Texas. And San Marcos was right in the middle of that. And they had instituted a social media archive right before the flooding during Memorial Day weekend. And sure enough, with the flooding and the emergency response, social media was critical for informing folks, and it led to public records requests that included the social media. So this archive was able to produce the records for those requests. But on top of that, San Marcos also employs some analytics tools with their archive that allowed them to reconstruct the emergency response timeline using the social media that they posted as well as photos from citizens. They built that timeline. They were able to review what happened and really understand what people were talking about, what they cared about, and that really paid off because just 6 months later, Texas was hit with a second flood during Halloween weekend, and they were just that much more prepared, again, with the archive for records requests, but also with the analysis they had done using archived content. Now, circling around the country, Santa Barbara, another police department, again, involving a public records request. Again, this is an issue that's not only relevant to Massachusetts, but every state has a public records law, and they're very much the same at the heart of these records laws. This department had been considering archiving for a long time and being proactive. They had never had a request, though, and so they weren't really feeling the urgency. And at one point, the officer decided, let me go ahead and just set up a free trial. And at the same time, they've been running a gun buyback program because that's what the city had decided to do. A very controversial program, as we all know. And there was a lot of controversy on the Facebook page. And just 3 weeks into their free trial of ArchiveSocial, the NRA, the National Rifle Association, issued a public information request for all the communications related to the gun buyback. Now, this is a very, very powerful organization making a legitimate request, but it's something that can be very scary as you read this government technology case study, that you want to get that public records request right. You don't want to miss anything. It could take a lot of effort, but fortunately had the free trial, was able in a few clicks to return that data. Nothing bad came out of it, which is the result you want, and they're able to move on and actually went ahead and did another gun buyback program later in the year with really no issues there. So again, you want to be able to produce the information because there are legitimate requests for it, but you don't want that to bring you down. And finally, City of Spokane, this is nothing to do with public records. As I mentioned before, social media touches everything you do, and one of the most common activities on social media for government is to communicate about the events in your community. And so Spokane had been sharing information about a kayaking trip, and unfortunately, due to weather and other conditions, somebody died on that kayaking trip out of hypothermia when they fell out of the kayak. And so the lawsuit for the victim referenced a number of organizations, including the City of Spokane, saying, you communicated about this kayaking trip. We want 2 years' worth of Facebook content to see everything that you said about this trip in terms of the conditions when this trip would happen, when it would, and other guidance you had provided. And in Washington, just like Massachusetts, there is a timeline for which you have to respond to public records requests or you can receive fines. And so if you read the case study from Government Technology, Spokane had an archive in place. They were able to respond immediately, but if they were really concerned that if they did not have the archive, that they may not have been able to respond, and certainly not in time. And so again, archiving allowed them to weather that situation. Again, it's the kind of stuff that unfortunately happens. There's always legal incidents and litigation because government is a part of everyone's lives. But they're able to move on and continue to reap the many, many benefits of social media because of their proactive actions. And that's really where we want to take you. Again, whichever archiving approach you choose to go with, whether that's some kind of manual archiving, some kind of automated, whatever vendor you choose, we want you to have this data in your control so you're protected, so you can respond when needed and continue to use social media where it provides all of that value to you. One big thing for us to talk about is, as we get into archiving best practices, is this question of the data being on Facebook and Twitter and these other sites. I know about 60% of you currently are relying on Facebook and Twitter. Not an unreasonable thing to do because the data is already there, and hopefully it stays there. But at ArchiveSocial, we decided to study this. And so in January of this year, we ran a study that covered 400 public agencies' Facebook pages. And we have technology in our archive that can detect deletions from Facebook. Whether the city deletes it or the citizen deletes it, we can detect it right away. And so we ran the study just for 1 month in January, and for 400 agencies, we saw nearly 7,800 communications deleted from Facebook. Now, not every agency had a deletion, but 3 out of 4 did. So 75% of the agencies had at least one deletion. Some agencies had dozens. And if you talk to these customers, they're not deleting. They're generally not deleting. Just like any agency, as many of you are probably thinking right now, I never delete anything off of our page. We hide it, or we edit it, but we don't delete it. And it turns out that not only are some staff members deleting, but your citizens are deleting too. And they could be deleting a crime tip. They could be deleting important information that fulfills your records requirement, that would fall within your records requirements. And we were continuing to run this in the background and just seeing just an amazing amount of data being lost. And it's not actually surprising in the technology world to have this kind of information decay. There's actually a name for it. But it is really eye-opening when you see these stats. And so it is likely, if you've been on Facebook for a few years now, there's communications on your Facebook page of value that are no longer there. So the sooner you can take action, the better. And I want to talk to you about that. Ultimately, that boils down to social media archiving. Those of you who are taking screenshots, I applaud you for doing something rather than nothing, but I know how painful that is. I know there's challenges. How do you search your folder screenshots after a few years of doing that? How do you find time to do that regularly and make sure you don't miss anything? So ultimately, we want to talk about some kind of social media archiving technology, and what I want to do is share some fundamentals here for you to think about and some best practices. And we've boiled down to 4 factors to consider when you think about record retention of social media. Again, social media is different than email and your files because it's not in your control. It's on Facebook or Twitter. You've got to get it in your control first. But then it's very much, you have to retain it for the same reasons that you retain your emails and your files. So how do you get in your control? It starts with frequency. Get it as soon as you can. There is data loss, as we just saw, and the sooner you can get it, the more likely you are to avoid that data loss. Be comprehensive. This is being broadcast in public. Millions of people could have seen your post and these conversations. So it's better for you to have more than less, and you have to have both sides of the conversation. Nicole mentioned this concept of metadata, which is basically what you see on Twitter.com, 140 characters. We're going to look at an example of this, but 140 characters of a tweet is not the entire electronic record. You want the whole record. You want to be able to take it to court and prove that it's authentic. If you've taken screenshots and you go to court and use that as evidence, what stops somebody from challenging that screenshot? How can you stand behind it and say, we didn't Photoshop this, or this wasn't falsified? So you want a record-keeping approach that can serve as legal evidence. And context, this is something that not a lot of archiving vendors talk about. We all like to talk about storing your data for you. Don't worry, we've grabbed your Facebook and we've stored it somewhere. But what happens when you do have a records request for a Facebook conversation from 2 years ago that had hundreds of comments over the course of 3 weeks? How do you replay that? How do you rebuild that? How do you do that easily? How do you know that you have all your data, and how do you make sense of it? So that's where context comes in. So I'm going to give you some very specific examples here, starting with that comprehensiveness. When you have an archiving approach, one thing to recognize is that 60% of you are not doing any kind of record keeping, not even screenshotting. You need to have something in place eventually, just like you do for your email. But by the time you do that, you've probably already been on Facebook or Twitter for a long time. But how do you get that data? So here's an example. This is Facebook's original homepage from 2004. You want to look for archiving technology that goes back to the beginning of time and gets everything it possibly can out of Facebook, out of Twitter, these sites, and it gives you an archive to start with. So you're not starting without thousands of communications that you've had in the past. You want to look for an archiving approach that not only focuses on your timeline or just your Twitter feed, but your private messaging, your mentions, your favorites. You want all those different aspects of the social network because there's all sorts of communications, especially on something like Facebook where there's many different ways to communicate today. You want to be as comprehensive as possible. And then you want to get that as frequently as possible. So once you've pulled in that history, day to day, you're communicating throughout the day, how do you capture the content in real time or within minutes, not once a day or once every few hours? Again, you want to have that information in your control as soon as you can. So you want to start with trying to get everything you can off these social networks because it could constitute public record, and you certainly need it in your control before you can decide that. And you want to get that, what we call metadata. So it's not just about the content of the communication, it's about the true record. And I mentioned the example, well, here it is. A tweet that may be 126 characters actually has more than 2,000 characters of metadata. This is the true electronic record from Twitter with user IDs and timestamps and location information. And you really want that true electronic record because multiple states have come through and said, yes, metadata is just as much part of the public record as the content of the communication. One thing to really point out here is that it's not as simple as just grabbing Facebook and storing it somewhere. The devil is in the details, as it is with anything that involves risk, as it is with anything that involves record retention or any of your legal circumstances. And you have to recognize how complex and how many details there are with your social media communications. Today on Facebook, one example here is you can comment on top of comments. You can embed multimedia not only in your posts, but in your comments. So citizens can respond back with a photo like we're seeing in this example. And you can even have communications that on social media, due to various constraints, may not tell the whole story, but you need the whole story. So here's an example. Here's Twitter. As we all know with Twitter, we use short URLs, owlies and bitlies and tiny URLs. But an Owly really doesn't give you the full context of that communication. Because Owly could be reused in a few years, it could go away. You really want to know what that tweet was about. You want to know what site it was pointing to. In this case, it was pointing right back to the city's website. And having that detail really goes a long way in protecting your city. So it really is about the details when you're thinking about social media archiving and a solution to do that. Beyond the details of each record, it's about being able to put that conversation back together. So normally when we think about records management, we think about retrieving records. With social media, you need to replay it too, because you can find that one comment that you're looking for, but without the rest of the conversation around it, that you really can't tell the story. You really can't respond to that records request. And so here's an example from Instagram. Instagram has comments just like Facebook. So does YouTube. So does Pinterest. And we might find this one comment, and you want to be able to replay it by showing that whole thread and see that entire Instagram post again in your archive, regardless of what's happened now on Instagram. That may have been deleted or lost, but in your archive, you need to be able to replay this. And again, this really pays off when you've had an incident that generates hundreds or thousands of comments. And on that notion, ultimately having a solution like this, some kind of record-keeping in place, is to answer a request from somebody, whether that's a journalist, a advocacy group, or anyone else. You want to answer that request. But when you answer that request, you need to be able to provide the information, and again, that has that in a way that has that context that people can make sense of and know that you answered their question. Because if they don't think that you've answered their question or their request, they're coming right back, and that's really going to be a distraction and a real burden for you. So one of the best practices we've seen with archival is once you have the record and the best form you can have it in an archive, you still need to be able to get it out, and you need to be able to get it out as PDF. PDF really is the standard. Now, a lot of archiving products were built for financial services and other industries, so they may have an Excel export. Excel is really, really difficult to work with in social media because it's a living, breathing conversation. So look for PDF, and look for solutions that really rebuild that conversation. So maybe you narrowed it down to a topic that the records request was about. You have 100 posts that match that keyword. There may have been 10 comments in there, and so forth. But really those 10 comments, 3 of them belong to the same conversation, and the other 7 belong to another conversation. And so you want to look for the ability to recombine that and get it out in a PDF. And in this example, we have a search like that gets reconstructed, and then the results are highlighted of what matched, but then you have the rest of the conversation around it. And that's really, really powerful for responding to records requests. You want to think about, again, not only storing it, but how are you going to respond to that request in a way that's really usable. And finally, when it comes to archiving, this has typically been a back-end concern for IT to deal with, but IT doesn't really own your social media presence in many cases. Maybe they do, but maybe they don't. Oftentimes the communicators have the keys to the social media, and there's actually a lot of value that an archive can provide to a communicator. And what we've been working on with many of our customers is leveraging that value. One of the things that we identified is that public records law is one part of your policy, but you have other aspects like profanity, the First Amendment issues. You want to be able to monitor your social media for content that violates your policy and deal with it quickly. So technology now exists to alert you immediately of content that violates your social media policy, whether that's profanity, whether it's personally identifying information. It can deliver that to you in an email alert so that you can act upon it right away. And know that you have the record in an archive. So it's more of an end-to-end enforcement of your policy, not just the record keeping, giving you that really active risk management. And not only that, not only can you actively manage risk, but with an archive, there's so much value in the data. So we have technology now that actually measures all sorts of metrics about your social media, including how positive or negative the response is from your citizens, so that you can be aware of controversial topics. You can more easily highlight topics that generated a lot of negativity or positivity to discuss internally. And by the way, discussing the positive has been really powerful for a lot of our customers to show what works on social media and ultimately have a gauge of how you're serving your citizens. So a lot of value can come out of having this data in your control. So I'm going to wrap up here. One thing I want to just call out is that while we do sell a commercial product, as a company, we are 100% focused on social media. We're 100% focused on government. We also want to just be a resource to you. So we have a number of free resources, and perhaps the most important one is this resource called Crisis Support. So all of this archiving, all of this importance around archiving, if you're not archiving today, it's still important for you if you're in a crisis, because a crisis situation like a shooting, act of terrorism, a natural disaster, those are the situations where public records requests and legal requests are magnified. we want to get all this archiving and all this monitoring, alerting, and analytics in your hands, and we'll do it pro bono. So if you're in a crisis or you had a recent crisis just a few days ago or a week ago, go to this website, put your information in, your name, email, and a link to a news article about what happened to you, and we will actually give you 100% free access to our archiving technology, our reporting analytics technology, everything you need to protect you for 30 days during that crisis so that you can hopefully reduce the burden of public records requests and everything else that comes along with a crisis. And we do that at absolutely no cost, no obligation. The only thing we ask for is your feedback. The public sector has been good to us, so this is our way of giving back. And we hope that we can support those of you who have yet to put an archive in place but need some support in the event of a crisis. And with that, here's my contact information, and I look forward to addressing your questions.
Fantastic, Anil, and I'll tell you, everybody, this is why, we've gotten so many comments on this, and so many questions on this. So, but want to be respectful of your time before we hop into the Q&A. Just a real quick thing. We have been getting a lot of questions. Yes, a complete copy of today's presentation within the next 48 hours. We'll give you a link to that. We'll give you a link to the recording. Make sure you share it, like I said, with all your friends. So let's dive into the questions. We've actually had some very good and a couple unique questions, Anil, with all the ones we've done I haven't seen yet before. So let's go to, first of all, Nicole McSweeney. She actually was the first one to pop into question, so she gets to go first. And actually, she asked, how much does ArchiveSocial cost? So that's obviously a question for you, Neil.
And it's a question I love, and thank you for asking that. One thing that's really important to us is we sell a transparency product, so we want to be as transparent as possible. So, Nicole, you can go to our website, ArchiveSocial.com, look for the pricing tab. All of our pricing's out there transparently. To give folks an idea, though, so you don't have to click around to get there, we have priced this product to really be accessible to the vast majority of public agencies under a discretionary spend. So most public agencies, about 80% of public agencies, towns, cities, counties, state agencies, can purchase ArchiveSocial for under $5,000 annual. There's no other fees. There's no fees on accessing the data or data storage or anything else. It's just a fixed cost, under $5,000 annual. If you have a smaller social media presence, it can be half that. If you have a larger presence, it can be more than that. And we really align our pricing to the value that we provide, which is how much true activity you have on your social media. But check out that pricing and feel free to contact us if you have any questions.
Great. Hey, and this question is actually for both of you because I think it's an interesting question. It comes from Don DeGloria, Salisbury Office of Emergency Management. So, Nicole, let's hop in with you and talk about your use of social media and emergency notification systems. Do you guys have an ENS, an emergency notification system platform, in addition to social media? And if so, how do you use it?
We do. We use them both in conjunction together. We use all of our platforms at the same time, especially when managing crises. So whatever we push out using our emergency notification with the reverse 911, it also hits our Facebook pages, our Twitter accounts, our website. We also send out an e-blast and an SMS message. So we do use them all together, especially during critical communications, whether it be for there's no parking on the roads during a snowstorm, or if there's a missing person and we need your help locating them. So we do use it in combination with our social media platforms and website.
Yeah, and Anil, I know that we've talked, and no, that's great stuff, Nicole. And Anil, I know we've talked a lot about how social media is used in emergencies. How are you seeing, just kind of add on to that, I know that you don't have a, quote, true emergency notification system, but really social media is, in a sense, used as that a lot in terms of what you've seen on a lot of your customers.
Absolutely. One of the ways that we look at social media and the agencies we work with look at social media is that it establishes emergency infrastructure. You spend day-to-day time, you invest time in social media, creating that connection with your audience. You may be posting about things that are not that legally oriented, or they may not even be that game-changing, but you're having fun. You're sharing information that may be elsewhere, but you're building that audience. And when crisis or emergency strikes, you have that direct line now to an audience who can then amplify your message and get it out there. And that's really the power, is getting that official message out there and amplified by the social network. On the topic of an ENS, we by no means are an ENS, but we are very complementary to it. So one of the capabilities that we've brought out based on customer feedback is that alerting I talked about. Not only does that alerting work for your social media policy, but we have a public safety and emergency management alert that looks for keywords related to emergencies. It's a fuzzy match, so anything that sort of matches those words. If you put terror, it could match terrorists, it could match terrors, it could match anything related to it. and alerts you internally to give you a sense of, is something happening because it was reported by a citizen. So it's very, very complementary in that sense.
No, that's good stuff. And folks, as you can see, there's a lot of facets to what we're doing here. Hey, we actually have another question came in from Karis Lustig, Needham. And this is kind of a unique question, too. Does public information requests, and Nicole, this is going to be directed towards you first. So when you receive public information requests, have you had people, I mean, what he's asking, Karis is asking is, does this apply to non-sanctioned Facebook groups that discuss town issues? So I know that it's not run by the town, it's not run by Framingham, but do you get those public information requests? And then, probably the obvious response to that is you're not really responsible for that content, but how do you handle when you get a request like that?
We just advise them that it's a non-town related information site. We do have a lot of other outside groups and outside agencies that have Facebook and Twitter accounts that are interested in what's happening in the town, and they post information on there. But we do not capture their information. We capture town-specific sites, department sites, our Department of Public Works, our police department, as well as our library has them. Our planning board has a Facebook page. Like I said, we have a lot of Facebook pages, Twitter accounts. If they happen to post or share information to our accounts from those interested groups, it is captured. We do capture it through the ArchiveSocial tool. So if they're, especially we have a very tight disclaimer on our sites, and that's something that every department, agency, city, town, every government agency should have a disclaimer on their site, where if it strays away from the conversation, we can delete the comments, but we still want to capture them. Or if they're using, like you said, profanity or, attacking someone, we do remove those posts. They have to comply with the disclaimers that are on our sites, but we still want to archive those. So other than that, Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, sounds familiar. We were talking about have a policy first, right? Once you have a policy, it's easy to do all these other things. Hey, Anil, this one's for you, actually, and I know this one's near and dear to your heart, too. Again, Nicole McSweeney saying, if you sign up for ArchiveSocial, does it just archive records from that point forward, or can you get past records?
Great question, because, again, folks who have been on Facebook and Twitter and these other sites prior to being aware or even the technology existing to support you for archival, and we do go back. ArchiveSocial will actually go back to the inception of your social media accounts, to get everything that's available and provided by the social network to us. Again, something that was deleted won't be there anymore. It's just gone. Or there may be limits to, depending on the social network, on what they provide to us. But with Facebook, for example, in those cases, we go back and get all the data from the beginning of time. That's still there. Twitter, we can go back, assuming you haven't been extraordinarily prolific on your Twitter account, and get it in your possession. And that's something that we do at no cost to you. It really is just important to have that level set in the beginning of your existing data before we get new data for you.
And then, folks, that's the thing is that if you don't capture it right, you got to get in and capture it, because once it's gone, I doubt Facebook will go back and search all their servers for this content. We had a good question from John Galinas as well, Cambridge Fire Department. Actually interesting, too, said, Nicole, this one's also directed at you. So what are your policies and what are the responsibilities of employees when they use their personal Twitter or Facebook accounts, but they use the city internet or Wi-Fi accounts? Do you guys have a policy on that? How do you handle something like that?
They're not supposed to be using the town internet or Wi-Fi connections. They're not supposed to be using their personal Facebook or social media accounts on work time. So I mean, that's basically it. The social media pages that we use are for our purposes alone, the town's purposes alone. We don't necessarily allow our employees to use their personal Facebook or Twitter. If they're on their break and they're on their own personal network, their own phone, or they bring in their laptop and they connect into the public Wi-Fi to get to their social media accounts, that's one thing, but we don't endorse our employees using, we don't accept our employees doing their own personal business on their computers, laptops, or town-issued phones because they are subject to public records requests.
Right. That is an excellent point. Hey, Neil and guys, we've probably got time for just one question here, but it actually came from putting together the public records request response, and you were showing the PDF. So Don DeGloria was asking, he said he has to imagine the PDF file size, back in storage for some of this would be huge. So tell us about what the report looks like, because there could be things like embedded pictures and video. How do you handle those artifacts when you do produce the report?
Yes, Don, you're absolutely right. There are some technical challenges there, and so you really have to think about how you do this effectively in a way that scales. And ours has been, I can talk to ArchiveSocial's approach to this, is we want to give you that context, we want to give you this information in a PDF. And so we've put great effort into, one, if you're exporting thousands upon thousands of records, we will actually create separate PDFs based on, I forget exactly how many records in each PDF, but we'll basically create separate PDFs and give them numbers. So it's results 1, results 2, results 3. In terms of media, we do include thumbnails in the PDF, so you have that context. But of course, we don't want to put that high resolution photo. So we have a bunch of options around. When you're creating that PDF, you can check a box that says also export all of the multimedia. And so what we'll do is we'll create a folder for you that then has the full high-resolution photo or the full video, for example, and it's all organized. And so we've put a lot of effort in the export. We think that's really where the value is getting the data out. And just to give you an idea, we have organizations like the City of Chicago, North Carolina as a state, as an entire state, that have, City of Austin, that have between 500,000 to 1 million records in the archive that have done either full exports or full exports of a year or a month even. We're talking hundreds of thousands of records, and all that needs to be chunked down, broken up, but organized in a way that you can still use it. And so that's where we've put a lot of our effort.
And I can tell you, Neil, you're definitely not emailing a PDF of that size to somebody, so that would be huge. I mean, how big did that end up being?
Oh, I mean, we have, it's interesting because tweets don't actually take up a whole lot of data storage, but when you do bring in the photos and the videos, they can add up. And so we absolutely have exports that are hundreds of megabytes or potentially even gigabytes. And so we put it in a zip file, but you're right, you probably want to host that on a Dropbox or a Google Drive or something else like that. But the key is really not giving you one giant file that's unusable, but giving you a lot of organization and allowing you to work with those organized files.
Yeah, that would be considered a denial of service if you tried to email me a 2 gigabyte file on email. So we just won't, guys. That's why the technology is so great, because it's about linking to it, about making sure that it's usable. Hey, we are at our time. Look, there's some more questions. I apologize we can't get to those today, but we do want to be respectful of everybody's time, so we are going to have to wrap it up here. First of all, I want to thank our speakers. First of all, Nicole, great job. Thank you so much for being on. By the way, Tom Brady is innocent. I've received several comments, so we're all in agreement with that. Neil, you too. Thanks again. A lot of insight there, folks. And on behalf of myself, and Government Technology, we want to thank our partner, ArchiveSocial, for enabling us to bring this, folks, to you. I'm telling you, folks, it takes a lot of cooperation, and they've been great partners for us. So thank you. Thank you. We look forward to seeing you on yet another Government Technology event in the near future. And if I can be of any help, just let me know. There's my contact information. Folks, everybody have a safe day. And you folks in law enforcement, we've got your back. Thank you guys for your service, your first responders. And we will see you on the next event. Thank you, everybody.